Hi, I'm Annika Johnson from Al Johnson's in Sister Bay. I hope you enjoy my new video series called Door County Girl. These are stories of my life, the people and places that I love, and of course how we all survive here in northern Wisconsin. You can come back as often as you like, but don't forget to subscribe to Al's YouTube channel. I'll be posting lots of really cool new videos. So let's go! Welcome to another episode of Door County Girl. I am in Al Johnson's Swedish restaurant in the kitchen. And in this kitchen that we're standing in right now, several years going by, we've had the opportunity to have a lot of really good cooks and chefs come through our doors. Some are still with us, some are not. And the first one we're going to talk about is John Ostran. And Johnny Ostran, that we call Johnny O, he is our baker here at Al Johnson's, but he is a man that wears many hats. He used to own a men's clothing store back by the pond. I believe it was one of the first men's clothing stores up here. He does the dishes if he has to. He bakes us cookies and goodies all day long, makes our help lunch. So he's kind of one of those invaluable employees that we have that goes above and beyond what his job entitles him to do here as our baker. And every day I come into work, I look up on the board up here where it tells us the soup and sandwich, and he writes things like small quotes that get me through the day. And everybody kind of mocks him, but I read them and say, that's really cool that he wrote that. So Johnny O is one like this. Ability may get you to the top, but it takes character to keep you there. It's just something to think about. And just reading that, it just shows you what kind of guy John Ostran is.
I lived across the street from the Sister Bay Post Office, which was right across from the beach, the park. And Al's was three buildings down. And I never quite went all the way to Al's. I just went to the grocery store next door. For some reason, I don't know why. I thought it was for rich people. I don't know, rich people. And then when I was a junior in high school in 1968, I asked Al's kitchen manager, who was a friend of my family, if they had a job for me, and he told me to come over and see Al. So I got enough courage to go in the restaurant, and I sat down at the counter and got a little bottle of Pepsi, and waited for Al to come out, and he talked to me and hired me. And I've been there ever since. Both my parents worked at Husby's, because that was my dad's aunt. And so I basically grew up at Husby's. And between Husby's and the Sister Bay Bowl. My dad was sickly, so when my dad was sick and gone, I would move in with the family at the Bowl, and we, did that, and ran around downtown. Of course, being across from the park, all the kids were there, and we just had a lot of fun. It'd be either at the beach, or we'd be behind the Red Owl store in the swamp, floating around in wash tubs in the water, swinging from the grapevines, just doing kid stuff. And then a lot of the kids I hung around with all ended up working at Al Johnson's. So it just continued as we grew. And the old Helms Resort in Sister Bay, they had a bell that rang for their kids, and when that bell rang, they took off. Bill had a whistle, and everybody knew Bill's whistle, and so that's when you parted. The party time or playtime was over. In front of a Youngworth's hardware store, there was a big green lawn there, and we basically played there, or we went over to the administration building now, which used to be the Bank of Sturgeon Bay, and we'd play in front of there in the grass. And well, with my dad and mom working at Husby's, and me being there most of the time in the back, when it was cherry season and the cherry pickers would come up, Friday was payday, so they would all, the buses and the big trucks would come to town, and they would cash their checks and either go to the grocery store or they'd come up to the bars and get a drink. But they could only buy the drink inside. Then they had to go outside to drink it. And as kids, we weren't allowed to be out too late then. And I would come to Husby's early in the morning, and there would be some people laying around in the yards, so our folks were against that. And at that time, I lived up in that area. So, but at the bowl, at the Sister Bay Bowl, they had a bar in the back of which is now the bowling alley. It used to be a dance hall, and that's where they could go to drink, get their drinks. And the same thing up on that side. It was beer bottles and stuff laying around, and sometimes people laying there, so us kids had to watch it. I was petrified. I was scared going in there anyway, and I didn't know the guy at all. And but Danny had given him, Danny Peterson, who was the manager, filled him in on me, and my father died when I was in 8th grade, so it was just my mother and I. So the extra income was helpful, and Al knew that. So he told me to come in the next day, and came in and got suited up I became a busboy. And at the time, Al's had an apartment upstairs, and that's where all the busboys, dishwashers, and then went up there to get ready for work. Or you went up there to have your lunch. There was a long roof front on it, and you would sit out there in the sun on your lunch break and eat your meal, and then go back down to work. That was in the 70s, or 70, because the log building came in 71. The Swedish Girls that Al brought over for the first time, or they weren't the first ones, but that was when he first started bringing the Swedish Girls over in the early 70s. And at that time, they were my age, and there were 4 of them. And it was Gunilla, Liselott, Brigitta, and Gertrude. And they were waitresses, and the 2 younger ones, Gunilla and Lotta, became bakers, and they made pies when the baker was off. And so and then at night after work, we all hung around together. Al's baker was Elaine Mickelson, and she did it out of her home at the time. And we would, as busboy and dishwasher, we would hop in Al's old Chevy green pickup truck, and we'd have to run up to Elaine's house and pick up pies. And this one time we went up and picked up the pies, and we should have turned the pie rack backwards, but we kept it forward. And for some reason we had to make a quick stop, and all the pies flew out of the rack and onto the floor of the truck. And we looked at each other and thought, who is going to tell Al Johnson about his pies? It was not a good thing. But Elaine eventually quit, or stopped baking, and then Al decided that he would have the baking done in the restaurant. And that's when the 2 Swedish Girls started doing it. And then on their days off, I had learned how to do it And that's just how I became the baker. I did this just on their days off. I was the busboy. Then I always was in the kitchen, and Al and Danny and David Dobner were in there, and I was always standing by the cooks, watching them cook. And then Danny asked me to step in a little bit, and then I became a line cook after about a year and worked with Al and Danny Peterson. And that was quite an experience, working between those two. Yeah, scared like you wouldn't believe. I remember one day I was scraping the grill, and Danny had all his eggs on the other grill next door, and I scraped a little too hard, and all the black junk from the grill flecks flew over on top of all his eggs. And, you know, there was some pleasantries said to me. And, you know, it just was a scary thing, especially with Al with his loud voice. Definitely a learning experience. But I did that line cooking most of my time there. And then we had two ladies that worked the sandwich end of the line, and they were older ladies, but lots of fun. And we had really good times in the kitchen. Well, being the line cook, that year I was senior in high school, and so thoughts of college came. And so that fall, I moved to Green Bay, went to school for a semester, decided at Christmas time it was not for me, came back, and in spring and May, Al called me up, asked me to come back, start cooking. And that was the May of 1971, and I was a line cook since then. And I don't know how many years I've been baking, but there have been full-time bakers. Helen Burse was a full-time baker, and Pat Olson was a full-time baker. And then when Pat retired, maybe 5 years ago, 6 years ago, that's when I stepped in and took over her position. But I still go on the line. I still wash dishes. I'll scrub pots and pans. Whatever has to be done. You just go with the flow, and you just experiment, try new things. Al always set kind of a menu of what pies were served on what days. So you went by that, and then you always had bread pudding, and you always had rice pudding. And anytime you were through with that, you could play around and maybe come up with something. Well, like today, I am making coffee cakes as we speak, and I decided I would take one and I would throw lingonberries in it. So I put the lingonberries in it, and we'll see what it tastes like. And it could be an item that I did it a few weeks back, and Annika Johnson, Al's daughter, had some of it and really liked it and thought, boy, this should be on the menu. So I thought, well, today I'll do it again and see what other people think, and maybe that'll grow into an item. Yeah, and it's Scandinavian, I would say, so people might like it. We've always had coffee cakes, and in the last few years I've added cherries to the coffee cake. I do strawberry or raspberry, blueberry, and that's taken off, and now we have regular coffee cake and we have a fruit-filled coffee cake during the season. In the summer, I come in at 3:30 in the morning. I'm the first one at work, usually, and first thing I do is turn on my oven, and then it takes a while for that to heat up, to get going, so then I go through the kitchen and turn the other ovens on for the cooks, and get things set up on the line. all their bread and their meatballs and the gravy going, and just help where I can because I've got time to do it. And then it's time to go to my table and start whipping out the pies. Back in 1975, I believe, I was deciding that I wanted to own a men's clothing store or go into men's clothing. And one of our head hostess had just bought a shop in Sister Bay where the boathouse is now. There used to be a women's clothing store. Well, she bought the business but moved it downtown. And she was going to have that, and she asked me if I'd be interested in putting men's clothes in her shop. So I went and talked to Al and told him I was thinking about leaving to go do this venture. And he didn't give me an answer right away, but I'd say a few days later, Al came back to me and he said that Al and his wife Ingrid wanted me to have the store in the back of the restaurant, the little log building, Telemark Butik. And then Al took me up to the bank and got me a loan to get going. And then him and Ingrid bought me tickets, and we flew to Dallas to the clothing show down there because they were buying for the boutique themselves. And then they showed me how to buy. And then from Dallas, we flew to Chicago to the Merchandise Mart and did that show and got things set up. And then that summer, I opened up the store in the back, the Telemark Boutique. But then Al threw in the waitress, or one of the employees, to work in my shop for me so that I wouldn't leave the kitchen. And that was the whole meaning of me getting the store, was to keep me employed. So that went on for a number of years at the back of the restaurant in the Telemark. And then Al bought the building up front and told me I could move up front on Main Street. So I moved up on Main Street and ran that one. And then I bought a store up in the Country Walk Shops and had the two stores and ran those for a number of years. And when the recession hit, I gave up one of the buildings and kept the store at Country Walk, but still stayed at Al's. And it was a women's clothing store, and my wife runs that. And she also works at Al Johnson's as the cashier. So between Al's and the store is where we both work. 3:30 in the morning till noon, but some days go longer, some a little less. And that I like that shift. I prefer it. And I've always, even when Al put me on the line as a cook, I pretty much worked the morning shifts because I had a nighttime job. I just wake up normally at my days off and all. I'm a 3:30, 4 o'clock person. If I was on the line, I worked 6 to 2, and I was off from 2 to 4, and at 4 o'clock, 4:30, I would be up at the Sister Bay Bowl, bussing or dishwashing. I eventually tended bar there for a while. Did that for a number of years. But now that I'm older, just a regular 8-hour shift is fine with me. Oh, and people come up to me and they say, "You're still there?" But it is so much fun to work there, and I love my job. I mean, you meet so many people, and everybody's fun. I mean, it's a good time, young and old. I know I have some of the foreigners come up to me, and they'll say, "Oh, you remind me of my grandfather," and or they call me sir, and I kind of go like, "Please, call me John." With Al's, from the Swedish Girls that we met, I, with another friend, flew over to Sweden for her wedding and spent some time traveling over there, and got to be friends with one of the girls' sons who comes over here and has worked for Al Johnson's. So it's just a very large family, friends that you meet. I don't see them, as much, but I was over there for the wedding, and then I went over, one of the Swedish girls, Gunilla, married a guy from here, and they were going over for Christmas, and I decided if I could go along, I would, so I went over again, and spent a Swedish Christmas over there, which was completely different, and nice to see. I met Betsy. She was a cashier at the bank, a teller at the bank, and going up there, and one time I told a friend, I said, I think I'm going to go ask Betsy out, Silky out, and he said, well, I just saw another one of our friends out with her this past weekend, and I went, oh, I guess I won't then. Well, I didn't do anything, and Betsy and my friend married for 10 years, had 3 children, and they landed up divorce. And so I asked her out, she said yes, and not too long after that, I was a proud father of a 3-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 7-year-old. And we've been married 30 years this year. So, then Betsy, Al went up to the bank, or went to talk to Betsy and asked her to come down and work at the restaurant because he liked her at the bank and he needed someone to be a cashier. And he put the 3 boys in daycare, and she came and worked, and she's been with Al for 36 years. And like I say, I've been 51 years, so. The kitchen, well, was much smaller at the time, and didn't have, as much equipment there. Dishwashing was just so completely different than what it is now, and the amount of business that we do right now. I mean, we didn't have the employees like we have now in there. But like I said before, I mean, they were just all great employees, every one of them, And a lot of the high school kids that I knew in school were at Al Johnson's, so it just kept, and when we would work with Al in there, he would be, like at night, we'd be getting done and cleaning up, and he'd run up to the patio drive-in, which is not going now, but he would get banana splits for all of us. And we would just be like really beat from the day, and he'd come in with all these banana splits because the restaurant was closed, and he'd put them on the table, and we got cleaned up in the kitchen. We'd go sit and eat our banana splits. And then other days, we'd get off work and we'd bring out the Monopoly game and sit out at the table and play Monopoly till midnight. No one really cared to go home. It was just like a family unit there. It was a good time. Actually, Al took me to Chicago for the first time. I'd never been out of Sister Bay. I'm a country bumpkin, and he took me on we had to go buy some supplies, so he took me down to Chicago. And I remember just walking downtown with my eyes up in the air, staring and not watching where I was going. And he took me, this one night, he took me up to the top of the John Hancock building, and we had dinner up there. and which was amazing. And then we went to the, I believe it was the Airy Crown Theater at McCormick Place, and Eartha Kitt was there playing in Timbuktu. And he told me stories about her on the way down. And when Al and I were walking in to get to, we were in McCormick Place, but we weren't quite at the theater. All of a sudden, this woman came walking down, and she had one or two people, personnel with her or anything, and she had like 3 little dogs on leashes walking down this hallway. And all of a sudden, she stopped and she said, "Al Johnson." And me, I didn't know who she was, and Al yelled, "Eartha!" And he told me the story that him and his buddy used to always go to this jazz club or club, and she was the entertainer there. And they went there quite often, apparently, because she knew him, and that was a great experience. I mean, that was, you know, he took us all to Washington, D.C. on a trip. Every one of his busboys and most of the cooks, we had to leave someone behind to run the place. We stayed at the Watergate Hotel, which was famous at that time, and all of us had a great time. Yep. And Al and Ingert would go on buying trips or vacations, and then Al would ask me to stay with his 3 children. And now those 3 kids are my bosses. So it does come around.
Okay, so that was John Ostran. I'm glad you guys sat down and got a chance to listen to him speak a little bit. We could not run this restaurant without him. He's an amazing guy, just to know as a friend. And like I said, we couldn't do this kitchen or this restaurant without him. So thanks for joining us for another episode of Door County Girl. And don't forget to like and subscribe at the bottom of the page so you can join us for some other great little adventures that I'll be going on. You never know. See you later. Bye. Thanks for watching Door County Girl. Don't forget to subscribe, and we will see you next time.